If you have ever wondered what the world tasted like before refrigeration, before health inspectors, before anyone truly understood what bacteria could do to a human body, then tonight you are invited to step back through the fog and smoke of history into the cobbled streets of Victorian London, where survival meant eating whatever you could afford, and affordability often meant mystery. This is not a tale of grand banquets or royal feasts. This is the story of the working poor, the hungry masses, the children clutching pennies and hoping for something warm, something filling, something that would not betray them before morning. Tonight we wander through the markets, the pie shops, the street corners where vendors called out their wares with voices hoarse from coal smoke and endless repetition. We will taste eels pulled from the murky Thames, pies filled with ingredients best left unquestioned, and drinks made from roots you have never heard of. We will discover that the Victorians were resourceful beyond measure, brave beyond reason, and sometimes utterly bewildering in their choices. If you enjoy drifting through these strange and curious corners of history, consider joining us for more tales of the past, told softly, slowly, and without judgment. Now, let us begin. Dim the lights, settle into your blankets, and prepare to feast in your imagination on the strangest menu history has ever served. The Thames and the Eel, a love story born of necessity. It is early morning in the year 1854, and the city of London is waking beneath a sky the color of old pewter. The air is thick, not just with fog, but with the mingled scents of coal smoke, horse manure, fish markets, and the river itself, that great muddy artery winding through the heart of the city. You are cold, you are hungry, and you have exactly 3 pennies in your pocket. Breakfast is not a luxury, it is a necessity. And so you follow the smell of frying pastry and the distant call of a vendor whose voice cuts through the morning mist like a bell. Eel pies, hot and fresh, eel pies for a penny. You pause, uncertain. You have heard of eel pies, of course, everyone has, but you have never quite mustered the courage to try one. Today, however, courage is not the issue. Hunger is. You approach the cart, where a man with grime beneath his fingernails and a gap-toothed grin stands beside a battered iron pot. Steam rises in lazy spirals. The smell is surprisingly inviting, savory and rich, with hints of onion, pepper, and something faintly fishy that refuses to be ignored. You hand over your penny. He wraps a pie in a square of newspaper, the ink still fresh enough to smudge your fingers. The pastry is warm, flaky, and just solid enough to hold its shape as you bite down. Inside, the filling is creamy, slightly rubbery, and undeniably alive with flavor. If you close your eyes, you might almost believe you are eating chicken. If chicken lived underwater, had the texture of an old bicycle tire, and spent its life wriggling through the sewage-laden waters of the Thames. But it is warm, it is filling, and in a city where most meals are a gamble, this pie feels like a small victory. The eel is everywhere in Victorian London. Slithering through the river in great wriggling masses, hauled up in barrels by fishermen who barely flinch at their appearance, chopped and baked and jellied and sold on every street corner. For the working classes, eel is not a delicacy, it is survival. It is affordable, abundant, and remarkably difficult to poison accidentally, which, in a city where food safety is more rumor than reality, is a genuine advantage. The Thames, despite its reputation as one of the most polluted rivers in the world, is teeming with eels. They are survivors, these slippery creatures, thriving in conditions that would kill most other fish. And so, by necessity and by providence, they become the people's protein. Forget salmon, forget cod. Eel is what you eat when you cannot afford anything else. And the pie sellers know this. They know that a warm pie, wrapped in paper and eaten standing up in the fog, is sometimes the only comfort a person will have all day. You finish your pie, licking the grease from your fingers, and you watch the crowd around you. There's the chimney sweep, still covered in soot, scarfing down his breakfast like a man who has not seen food in days. There's the seamstress, carefully picking out the tiny bones with her fingers, dropping them onto the newsprint with delicate precision. Even a local constable stops by, which you hope is not an official endorsement, but at least a sign that the pies are unlikely to kill you outright. Nobody looks particularly thrilled, but everyone is eating. In a world without refrigeration, without choice, you take your chances, and you are grateful for what you get. Gin for breakfast, welks for courage. The sun has barely risen, though in London it is always difficult to tell.
The fog is so thick that the gas lamps are still burning, casting pale yellow circles on the cobblestones. You step out of your cramped tenement, eyes stinging from the smoke, stomach growling with a ferocity that demands attention. The street is already alive. Horses clatter past, their hooves striking the stones in rhythmic percussion. Vendors call out, their voices mingling into a cacophony of sound. And there, on the corner, beneath a splintered wooden sign that reads simply "Welks and Gin, Best Value," stands a woman in a battered shawl, ladling pickled sea snails into chipped bowls and pouring gin that smells faintly of turpentine. You consider your options. Tea is a luxury. Coffee, when you can find it, is roasted with chicory and hope and tastes like neither. But gin, oh gin, is everywhere. Gin is cheap, gin is warming, gin is there for you at dawn, at dusk, and at every moment in between when life becomes too cold, too hard, too much to bear. You take your bowl of welks. They glisten in their murky vinegar bath, plump and curling like tiny ocean ghosts. They smell briny, medicinal, and faintly alarming. The first bite is a challenge. Rubbery, salty, with the unmistakable flavor of seaside pebbles and a gentle aftertaste that whispers, "Are you sure about this?" You chase it with a slug of gin. The gin is harsh, sharp, and immediately warming. It lights a small illegal fire in your stomach and makes the second welk go down a little easier. Gin is not just a beverage in Victorian London, it is emotional infrastructure. It is the thing that keeps people upright when the world is pressing down. It is the thing that makes a meal of pickled welks feel almost festive. The combination of gin and welks is strangely effective. The gin numbs your taste buds. The welks provide chewable calories, and the vinegar ensures you will never quite forget this meal, no matter how hard you try. Around you, Londoners are hunched over their bowls, faces set in that special British way that says, "If I do not acknowledge the horror, maybe it will just be over soon." A dock worker chews slowly, eyes closed, as if hoping to astral project himself to a better breakfast. Two children share a bowl, daring each other to eat the biggest welk, while a toothless man offers unsolicited opinions on Queen Victoria and the comparative merits of eel versus welk. Nobody here is trying to impress anyone. Breakfast is not about pleasure. It is about perseverance. For the Victorian working class, pickled welks are cheap, filling, and require no stove, no table, no preparation beyond opening your mouth and chewing. They are eaten standing up, leaning on rain-soaked barrels, washed down with gin that might double as lamp fuel. There is something almost heroic about it. You tip your empty bowl back to catch the last drops of vinegar, you wipe your mouth with your sleeve, and you step back into the swirl of the city, powered by gin, mollusks, and sheer British stubbornness. You have survived the breakfast of regret. You are now officially ready to face another day in the world's weirdest city. Black pudding, the breakfast that stares back. It is still early, too early. The London sky is an uninspiring shade of gray, which is actually an improvement over the color of your breakfast. You make your way to a crowded stall, dodging puddles that may or may not be water, and breathe in the aroma, if that is the word, of something frying in yesterday's leftover lard. The vendor, sleeves rolled and attitude unbothered, is slicing thick rounds from a black log of sausage, plopping them onto a smoking griddle. The sizzled is impressive. The color is alarming. If you did not know better, you would swear he was cooking slices of rubber boot. But this is no ordinary sausage. This is black pudding. Beloved by Londoners, feared by anyone with a squeamish streak. It is a marvel of Victorian thrift. Nothing goes to waste. The butcher's scraps, the onions, a generous handful of oats, and, of course, the main ingredient, fresh animal blood.
poured in and stirred until the whole thing congeals into a shape that could double as a medieval weapon. The blood is what gives it its signature color and that distinct, mineral-forward flavor. If you have ever wondered what it is like to lick a rusty fence, this is the breakfast for you. The first bite is an experience. The texture is unexpectedly soft, almost creamy, with just enough chew to remind you this is not a dessert. The flavor is earthy, rich, and slightly metallic. Your tongue can practically feel the red blood cells. You chew thoughtfully, pretending you are a sophisticated foodie, but inside you are just hoping no one will notice if you quietly hide the rest under your bread. Around you, Londoners are tucking in with gusto. Some slather their black pudding with brown sauce. No one is quite sure what is in brown sauce, but it is legally required to put it on anything remotely British. Others eat it plain, savoring every salty, iron-packed mouthful. Children are less enthusiastic, poking their slices with forks and making faces behind their mothers' backs, but they eat it anyway. In this city, you do not turn down breakfast, even if it stares back at you. Black pudding is not just food. It is a symbol. It says we are practical, we are tough, we are willing to eat things other people throw away, as long as we can call it a delicacy. It is the culinary equivalent of patching your socks with more sock. And if you are really lucky, today's batch is made with pig's blood, not something even more mysterious. Breakfast in Victorian London is about survival, but it is also about ritual. The sound of the griddle, the sharp smell of onions and lard, the chatter of people swapping stories and gossip, all mixed together in a chorus that says, "This is life. You may not have much, but you have black pudding, and that means you are part of something." You wipe your mouth with a slightly sticky napkin. You feel a weird sense of pride. You survived black pudding. You got your iron for the week. And tomorrow you will probably eat it again, because nothing wakes you up quite like a slice of sausage that is more metal than meat. The mystery meat market, where labels lie. You head to the market, greeted by the sight and smell of meat stalls, where the phrase, "Do not ask, do not tell," is a way of life. The labels say beef, but is it really? Horse, cat, and even the occasional dog have made their way into London sausages. You take a bite and hope for the best. There is a reason they called it mystery meat. The Victorian market is a spectacle. Cobblestones sticky with old fat, barrels full of something unidentifiable, and enough noise to wake the dead, or at least make you wish you were. It is not so much a food court as a food gamble, where every purchase is a roll of the dice, and every butcher has a story about where their fresh meat came from. The air is thick with the mingled smells of brine, sawdust, offal, and the sharp tang of vinegar meant to hide the fact that half the cuts are well past their prime. You drift from stall to stall, pretending you know the difference between rump steak and something that used to bark. "Prime beef," bellows a man who looks like he has never seen a cow in his life. You ask for a penny's worth and he winks, hacking off a chunk that might be brisket, or, judging by the color, might be anything at all. Beside you, a woman haggles for sausages, unconcerned by the streaks of green. Sausages are the great equalizer. Everything goes in, nothing comes out recognizable. They are the city's original recycling program, and the less you know, the happier you will be. Victorian butchers were masters of disguise. If you could mince it, spice it, and stuff it in a casing, you could sell it. Some days the beef was actually horse, especially during lean times. Other days it was cat, stray dog, or whatever had the misfortune of wandering too close to the riverbank. Londoners pretended not to notice. Food inspectors existed, but their standards were optimistic. If it did not kill you immediately, it passed. You buy a sausage roll, marveling at its ability to taste like absolutely nothing except salt, pepper, and regret. The pastry flakes in your hand, leaving behind a greasy residue you will carry with you for the rest of the day, both physically and emotionally. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks. You try not to make eye contact with your food. A favorite local delicacy is saveloy, a bright red sausage that has been boiled until the last trace of flavor has waved a tiny white flag. No one really knows what is inside, and it is probably better that way. Some say it is mostly pork. Others say mostly is doing a lot of work. You eat it with mustard so strong it could legally be classified as a cleaning agent, and you are grateful for it. At least the mustard is honest. Some stalls offer fresh pies, their tops golden and promising. The filling, however, is a mystery even Sherlock Holmes would not want to solve. It could be mutton, it could be rabbit, or it could be leftovers from last week's batch of something. The only certainty is that it is hot, filling, and unlikely to contain any actual vegetables. You watch as a woman counts out her pennies, debating between two pies that look identical. She picks the left. The right might have been yesterday's. You are not the only one playing this game. London's poor eat what they can, when they can, and everyone has a story about the time they bit into something unexplainable. There is camaraderie in uncertainty. At least you are not alone. Some joke that mystery meat is how the city builds character, and possibly antibodies. As you finish your sausage roll, you feel a strange sort of triumph. You survived the market's culinary roulette. You are a little braver, a little more suspicious, and a lot more appreciative of whatever comes in a can with a label you can trust. Cow's heel for lunch, the slippery truth. Lunchtime arrives, and the most popular street food is, of course, boiled cow's heel. Served as gelatinous slices in cloudy broth, it is more slippery than satisfying, but apparently good for your joints if you can swallow it without gagging. You are standing at a bustling street corner, pressed between a hot potato vendor and a man selling questionable meat pies. The line at the cow heel stand is already winding down the block. You cannot help but wonder, are people here for nutrition or just to see if anyone actually manages to keep the stuff down? A giant iron pot bubbles menacingly, releasing clouds of steam that carry the distinct aroma of wet leather, damp hay, and something your dentist would consider a cautionary tale. The vendor, arms bare and apron flecked with broth, is wielding a cleaver with the confidence of someone who has seen things and lived to tell about them. You approach, coin in hand, and watch as he fishes a quivering, translucent slab from the pot, the skin jiggling with a kind of pride only a cow's foot could muster. "Bit of salt?" he asks, tossing in a handful whether you agree or not. The cow heel lands in your bowl, swimming in a greasy soup whose contents are anyone's guess. There are rumors that the broth has been simmering for days, topped up with whatever is left after the morning rush. Onions, carrots, and the occasional lucky horseshoe. You take your first bite. The texture is complex, gelatinous on the outside, fibrous underneath, and somehow managing to squeak against your teeth. It is warm, it is slippery, and it feels a bit like chewing on your own courage. You try to focus on the flavor, earthy, beefy, and deeply committed to lingering long after you have swallowed. There is a reason Victorians believed in cow heel's restorative powers. After eating it, you feel like you have survived something monumental, possibly the dish, possibly your own gag reflex. Around you, others are tucking in with varying degrees of enthusiasm. A wiry laborer slurps his heel, swears it puts strength in your bones, and holds up a bony forearm in demonstration. Next to him, a harried mother encourages her children to eat up for health, though the youngest looks unconvinced and is quietly feeding scraps to a grateful stray dog. The cow heel stand is a social equalizer. Rich or poor, if you are hungry enough, you will give it a go. And truly, cow heel was marketed as the perfect Victorian superfood. Got aches and pains? Need to fortify your constitution? Cow's foot is cheaper than medicine, more filling than bread, and conveniently comes with its own broth. Even doctors, with their boundless optimism and lack of germ theory, might recommend a bull after a long night. There is nothing like a bit of cartilage and marrow to put the spring back in your limp. For the vendor, the cow heel pot is both a livelihood and a community service. He has heard every joke, every complaint, and every compliment, genuine or otherwise. Some customers claim it helps with the gout. Others say it is a cure for hangovers, heartbreak, or whatever ails you. Really, it is just food, strange, sticky, and surprisingly comforting when the wind cuts through your second-hand coat. As you finish the last wobbly bite and wipe your lips, you realize you have earned your spot in the great boiled cow heel standoff. Not everyone can face a Victorian lunch and walk away victorious. There is a camaraderie in this shared ordeal, a story to tell. Maybe not to your friends back home, but certainly to yourself the next time you eye a modern menu.
Because after you have survived boiled cow heel, no jelly dessert, no bone-in steak, and certainly no mystery soup will ever intimidate you again. Jellied eels, the dish that wobbles back. The Victorians loved to boil eels into submission, let them cool, and then eat them jellied, cold, quivering, and sitting in a bowl of their own stock. This dish is 1 part protein, 1 part dare. You are wandering down a damp, bustling street, and every other stall is hawking something that could pass for dinner or a science experiment gone wrong. There, in a battered glass display case, sits a wobbly mountain of jellied eels, shimmering faintly under the flicker of a gas lamp. Even the flies are hesitant. You watch as a vendor, hands red from the chill, deftly spoons out a gelatinous coil onto a cracked plate, slapping it down with the enthusiasm of a man who stopped asking why a long time ago. You stare at your serving. The eels, chopped into bite-sized pieces, are set in a translucent, jiggling jelly made by boiling eel bones until the very essence of wiggle is extracted. Each bite glistens, catching the light and your growing anxiety. The Victorians claimed this was a treat, a delicacy. You wonder if they just enjoyed watching newcomers try not to flinch. You muster your courage and prod the eels with your fork. They wobble in a way that is oddly hypnotic, like Victorian aspic, but fishier and somehow more suspicious. The first bite is cold, briny, and oddly refreshing, with a texture somewhere between firm noodle and underwater marshmallow. The jelly is savory, almost salty sweet, and clings to the eel like a damp handshake that lasts a little too long. Jellied eels were not just a food, they were an institution. Working-class Londoners would gather at eel stalls, catching up on gossip while slurping down mouthfuls of gelatinous fish. Some swore by a splash of malt vinegar or a dash of pepper to cut through the slipperiness, while the brave, or just the unbothered, ate them plain, savoring the delicate blend of fish, bone, and jelly. Children dared each other to swallow whole pieces without chewing. Grandmothers said it built character. You are not sure what it is building for you, but it is probably not appetite. Part of jellied eels' popularity came from practicality. Eels were cheap, abundant, and stubbornly immune to the Thames' many horrors. As long as you had a pot and some patience, you could have protein for the week. And the jelly made it possible to store the dish without refrigeration, a luxury for most. In a world where freshness was measured in hours, anything that did not rot before lunchtime was considered a win. Of course, the experience was not for everyone. There were always those who recoiled, and even in Victorian times, food critics could be savage. Some described jellied eels as an acquired taste, which is British for good luck with that. Others declared them invigorating or fortifying, while quietly reaching for the bread. Your fellow diners eat with casual indifference. A man in a battered cap slurps his eels with gusto, pausing only to complain about the lack of pepper. 2 dock workers argue over whose mom makes the best jelly, waving their forks dangerously. Even the local stray cat eyes the plate, uncertain. You finish your portion, heart pounding, not from excitement, but from the sheer weirdness of what you have just done. You survived jellied eels, the dish that separates tourists from locals and optimists from realists. There is a sense of accomplishment, a badge of honor, and possibly a lingering question about what else Victorians considered edible. And as you walk away, you decide some is an adventure, some is a test, and some, like jellied eels, is simply proof that when you are hungry enough, nothing is too slippery to eat. Saloop, the drink made from orchid roots. Needing something to warm your hands, you grab a cup of saloop, a Victorian beverage made from ground orchid tubers, sweetened with sugar, and a dash of mystery. It is hot, thick, and oddly comforting until you realize it is basically the 19th century version of a protein shake made from flower roots. Picture this. It is a dreary London morning, and you cannot feel your fingers. The air bites at your ears, and every breath is a chilly reminder that central heating is a distant fantasy. Coffee exists, but it is expensive, and unless you like your beans cut with chicory and disappointment, mostly reserved for the wealthy.
Tea is for the middle classes, at least when it is not just hot water pretending to be a beverage. For everyone else, there is saloop. You approach a street stall. The saloop seller stands behind a battered copper urn swirling with steam. The sign above reads, "Saloop, hot and cheering." He ladles out a viscous, milky liquid into a cracked mug, sweetens it with sugar, and gives it a stir with a stick that has definitely seen better days. The result? A pale, slightly gloopy concoction that smells faintly of vanilla, earth, and a secret no one will ever explain. You take a sip. The warmth floods your body, the thickness coating your tongue in a way that is both comforting and slightly alarming. There is a floral undertone, a sweetness that hints at vanilla, and a texture reminiscent of warm pudding left out in the rain. Saloop is not quite tea, is not quite coffee, and is not quite anything you have had before. It is the drink you reach for when you need calories, not excitement. Victorian Londoners loved saloop for its alleged health benefits. Made from powdered orchid root, or, when business was slow, from powdered sassafras, or whatever else the vendor could find, it was said to soothe coughs, cure colds, and put the color back in your cheeks. Whether that was true or just wishful thinking, no one cared. It was hot, filling, and best of all, cheap. In a world where breakfast might mean last night's bread crust, a mug of saloop was practically luxurious. You look around. Everyone is clutching their mugs like precious treasures, letting the steam rise and thaw the chill from their faces. Dock workers, seamstresses, chimney sweeps, and street urchins, all united by the universal desire to stop shivering. Saloop stalls are little islands of warmth in a city famous for its cold shoulders and colder weather. The drink has its own etiquette. Some people sip politely, pinky raised in a parody of high society. Others gulp it down, chasing the warmth as quickly as possible before getting back to their endless daily hustle. Children beg for a taste, noses pressed against the urn, dreaming of sugar and something that is not river water. Saloop is not immune to criticism. The texture unsettles some, the flavor confuses others. There are whispers about what actually goes into each batch. Is that real orchid root or just ground up parsnip? But in the end, no one asks too many questions. The point is survival, not satisfaction. Besides, the occasional crunch only adds to the experience. When you finish your mug, you are not sure whether you feel better, braver, or just slightly more hydrated. Maybe all three. You return your cup, wipe your hands on your coat, and head back into the London fog, fortified by a beverage that is 1 part health tonic, 1 part street magic, and entirely Victorian. And as you walk away, you make a mental note. If you ever complain about instant coffee again, remember the taste and the texture of saloop. Fresh milk, the gamble of the goat. Looking for fresh milk in London? That means literally following a goat through the streets or trusting a milkmaid who might have diluted her product with anything from river water to chalk. Every sip is an adventure in immunity. It is a pale, misty morning, and you step out of your cramped lodging, mug in hand, joining a crowd already gathering on the corner. Down the street comes the milkmaid, rosy-cheeked, hair tucked beneath her bonnet, arms corded from carrying pails heavier than most Victorian hopes. If you are among the lucky, she is trailed by a placid cow. If you are not, well, you get the goat. This is the daily dairy ritual, and your stomach is placing bets against your common sense. In theory, you could trust the product, but in Victorian London, fresh milk is a choose-your-own-adventure novel where every outcome involves intestinal risk. Pasteurization is still just a twinkle in Louis Pasteur's eye, and the notion of bacteria is something you catch in a bad fish stew, not from your breakfast. Most mornings, the only thing separating you from calamity is your milkmaid's honesty and occasionally her inventiveness. You line up behind a parade of regulars, children with chipped cups, housewives with battered jugs, and one elderly gent who swears by a pint of goat right from the source. The milkmaid gets to work. If it is a good day, she draws your portion straight from the animal, the warm milk frothing as it pours. If it is a bad day, you notice a suspicious swirl in the pail, a hint of chalk, a glimmer of flour, maybe even a little river water. Everyone knows the tricks. Some milkmaids stretch their supply as far as it will go, and the difference between rich, creamy milk and pale, watery disappointment is a matter of both luck and the recent rainfall.
And then there are the goats. Yes, actual goats, stubborn, unpredictable, and absolutely unfazed by city chaos. Some Londoners swear by goat's milk. Good for the nerves, the milkmaid claims, as her four-legged assistant munches contentedly on someone's laundry. If you are particularly keen, you can pay for a cup drawn right there, ensuring both freshness and a light dusting of goat hair. The taste is grassy, slightly gamey, and carries a strong undertone of, "What am I doing with my life?" On the street, milk is not just a drink, it is a spectacle. Children cluster around, hoping for a sip, or better yet, a chance to try milking the goat themselves. Housewives chat over the pails, swapping tips for disguising sour milk or sweetening it with a splash of whatever is left from last night's gin. Every so often, a fight breaks out over whose turn it is for the cow, with the goat owners looking quietly smug until the goat decides to make a run for it. The wealthy, of course, have private dairies, their milk bottled and delivered with all the ceremony of a state visit. For everyone else, it is street milk or nothing. When winter hits and the animals dry up, creative substitutes flood the market. Almond water, rice milk, or milk that is just boiled water and optimism. The dangers are real. Unpasteurized, adulterated, and transported in open pails, milk is a breeding ground for more than just good stories. Illness is common. Doctors warn against milk fever and the stomach complaint, but unless you are rich or remarkably paranoid, you take your chances. After all, you need something to stir into your morning tea, and water alone is just too risky. Still, there is a sense of pride in the ritual. You take your cup, pay your penny, and sip with caution, savoring the creamy days and surviving the watery ones. Each swallow is a testament to your constitution. Modern milk will never impress you again, unless perhaps it comes straight from the goat and with a story worth telling. As you head home, you realize you have participated in one of London's most enduring acts of faith, trusting the milkmaid, the goat, and your own hard-earned immunity, one sip at a time. Pea soup for dinner, grit and glory. Dinner means soup, but this is not your grandma's split pea. Victorian street soup is thick, salty, and sometimes contains things that are not supposed to be there, like grit, twine, or the occasional stray fingernail. Spoon carefully. It is nearing dusk in Victorian London, and you find yourself jostled along the crowded pavement, lured by the scent of something savory drifting from a battered cauldron on the curb. "Hot pea soup," the vendor bellows, steam pouring off his ladle and swirling into the cold air. The line is already 3 people deep, everyone clutching their chipped bowls and battered mugs. For the price of a halfpenny, you too can join the great British tradition of culinary optimism, hoping for comfort, bracing for chaos.
You approach, coins ready, and watch as your soup is slopped into a tin vessel with all the delicacy of a rugby scrum. The color is a robust green, if by robust you mean murky with mystery. The aroma is oddly inviting, a blend of peas, salt, smoke, and a dash of something you can only describe as London street. The first spoonful is hearty, hot, and filling. The second comes with a hint of crunch, and you quickly learn the Victorian rule, best not to investigate. Victorian pea soup is a masterclass in resourcefulness. The base is dried peas boiled down until they surrender their shape and dignity. Into the pot goes whatever the vendor can spare. Bones for flavor, a ham hock if you are lucky, scraps of root vegetables, and a generous helping of yesterday's leftovers. It is thick, salty, and engineered to keep a working stomach full well into the night. If you happen upon a bit of meat, count yourself fortunate. If you find something less pleasant, say a sliver of twine, a pebble, or the infamous fingernail, just consider it a little extra texture. Around you, London's hungry huddle over their bowls, blowing on the surface and swapping tales of the best pea soup stall in the city. For some, it is the flavor that matters. For others, it is the portion size. For most, it is just the convenience of a hot meal for less than a penny. It is thick, salty, and engineered to keep a working stomach full well into the night. If you happen upon a bit of meat, count yourself fortunate. If you find something less pleasant, say a sliver of twine, a pebble, or the infamous fingernail, just consider it a little extra texture. Around you, London's hungry huddle over their bowls, blowing on the surface and swapping tales of the best pea soup stall in the city. For some, it is the flavor that matters. For others, it is the portion size. For most, it is just the convenience of a hot meal for less than a penny. Street urchins scrape every last drop. Mothers use the thick soup to fill up hungry children, and laborers devour it as a prelude to another shift. The soup's heat wards off the chill, and the salt, intentional or otherwise, ensures no one eats too fast. Of course, not all soup is created equal. Some vendors stretch their batches with extra water, flour, or if they are feeling particularly bold, a scoop of something swept from the floor.
Still, you eat, grateful for the warmth and the way it lingers in your belly. Health concerns are for the rich and the delicate. For everyone else, a little bit of grit is just proof you are still alive. Conversation around the soup pot is brisk and pragmatic. Regulars argue about which vendor adds the most ham bone, which uses the least mystery ingredients, and which spot has the best odds of finding an actual vegetable. Jokes about protein surprise are as much a part of dinner as the soup itself. One man claims to have found a button. Another boasts of chewing something he swears was part of a broom. Adds character, someone says. Builds teeth, says another. As the last spoonful vanishes, you feel oddly satisfied. Your hunger is gone, your body is warm, and your sense of adventure is only slightly diminished. You survived the soup that fights back, emerging with a full stomach, a story to tell, and a lingering suspicion that you will be finding grit in your teeth for days. And as you return your empty bowl and blend into the fog, you realize you have just eaten the ultimate Victorian comfort food, a hot meal, a little bit of danger, and a big helping of resilience, all for less than the price of a cup of questionable coffee. Tripe shops, where stomach meets stomach. You pass a row of tripe shops, the windows fogged with steam and ambition. Inside, you are served a bowl of boiled cow's stomach, chewy as an old shoe and just as fragrant. Do not think about it too much. Just keep chewing. Step inside one of these steamy havens and the atmosphere wraps around you like a moist, meaty hug you never asked for. The windows are streaked with condensation, blurring the view of the world outside and leaving you cocooned in a gentle cloud of boiling beef and vague optimism. The clientele, dock workers with red hands, housemaids on their break, and the odd apprentice dreaming of steak, sit hunched over battered enamel bowls, spoons working furiously as if time and flavor are in short supply. You take your place at a communal bench, the table scarred by years of impatient cutlery and the ghosts of 1,000 lunches. A waitress with arms like rolling pins and a voice that could slice bread slaps down your bowl of tripe, a steaming mountain of white and gray ribbons bobbing in an ocean of broth. She offers you a chunk of crusty bread and a nod of encouragement that might be concern or just gas from her own meal. The aroma is unmistakable, something between freshly laundered laundry and a stable at the end of a long summer. You prod the tripe with your spoon. It yields reluctantly, bouncing back with the resilience of a Victorian boot sole. You muster your courage, dip the bread in the broth, and finally bring a strip of tripe to your lips. The first bite is a revelation, if revelation means a cross between chewing a damp book cover and trying to remember when you last had a dental cleaning. Tripe is quite literally the lining of a cow's stomach, cleaned, boiled, and, in the best shops, tenderized until it only slightly resembles the surface of the moon. For many, it is a taste of home. For others, it is a challenge to both palate and perseverance. The broth is hot, salty, and tinged with whatever the butcher could spare. A dash of onion, a carrot scrap, a hint of bay leaf. Sometimes there is a mysterious yellow sheen floating on top, and you just hope it is butter. Victorian London is a city of thrift, and tripe shops are its temples. Here, nothing goes to waste, not even the parts of the animal that seem least likely to inspire poetry. Tripe is cheap, nutritious, and, once you surrender to the experience, surprisingly filling. The bread is there for support, a necessary buffer between you and the unrelenting texture. Some locals drown their tripe in malt vinegar, others sprinkle it liberally with pepper, while the true believers eat it plain, savoring every chewy, slightly spongy bite. You glance around. The regulars barely notice their meal, eating with the brisk efficiency of those who know there are few alternatives. At the far end of the table, a pair of children giggle over their bowls, daring each other to slurp the biggest piece. An elderly man, mustache trembling, dips his bread and chews with solemn purpose, as if the fate of London itself rests on finishing his lunch. Tripe shops are as much about community as they are about sustenance. The air is alive with conversation, gossip about neighbors, complaints about the weather, whispered news of a pie shop opening across the street. Every so often, someone claims to have found the perfect way to cook tripe, a secret recipe involving cloves, beer, or an hour of prayer. The rest of the table nods, but no one ever seems convinced. Eating tripe is less about pleasure than perseverance. You chew, you swallow, you keep chewing. There is an odd satisfaction in it, a sense that you are part of a long, chewy tradition stretching back generations. In a world where luxury is for the few, tripe is for the many, humble, honest, and nearly impossible to ruin.
As you finish your bowl, scraping up the last of the broth with your bread, you realize you have survived yet another rite of Victorian passage. You step back into the chill street, mouth tingling, breath fragrant, and stomach undeniably full. In London's tripe shops, you found proof that with enough heat, salt, and stubbornness, even the humblest meal can earn its place on the menu. Sheep's trotters, portable protein, Victorian style. If you are feeling peckish, why not gnaw on a sheep's foot? Sold from carts and boiled until the bones threaten to dissolve, sheep's trotters are the protein bar of Victorian London. Portable, chewy, and likely to get stuck in your teeth for days. It is late afternoon, and you are wandering the maze of market stalls, following your nose past the scent of roasting chestnuts, cheap tobacco, and something that might once have been fruit. Then you hear it, the distinctive cry of the trotter vendor. Hot sheep's feet, penny a pair, strength for your bones and courage for your heart. You drift over, curiosity piqued and stomach growling. The vendor stands behind a battered cart, a battered iron pot bubbling away atop a pile of glowing coals. Inside, dozens of pale, knobbly sheep's feet bounce and roll in the broth. The occasional wisp of steam carrying a smell somewhere between boiled lamb and old sock. You hand over your penny and are handed a pair of trotters, gleaming from their long, slow bath. They are carefully wrapped in a strip of newspaper, which immediately becomes translucent as the gelatin starts to melt. The first thing you notice is the heat. The trotters warm your hands, a blessing on a cold day. The second is the texture. The skin is slick and shiny, almost translucent from hours of simmering. Beneath it, there is a layer of sticky, glutinous fat that squelches between your fingers, threatening to escape before you can even take a bite. But you are hungry, and this is Victorian London. You sink your teeth in and encounter resistance, firm, rubbery skin giving way to soft tendon and a sliver of marrow. It is not a refined experience. Each bite is a mix of flavors, savory, faintly sweet, and overwhelmingly, undeniably muttony. If you are lucky, the meat peels away in soft shreds. If not, you spend the next 10 minutes gnawing around a joint, trying to avoid splintering a tooth on a stubborn bone. There is satisfaction in the struggle. Every chew is a tiny triumph, every morsel a reward for perseverance. Trotters are beloved by the city's poor and working class. In a world where good meat is a rare treat, feet are abundant, cheap, and surprisingly filling. They are pure Victorian thrift, the original nose-to-tail eating. Vendors claim they will build your constitution, put color in your cheeks, or fix whatever ails you. Old wives' tales abound. Children are told they will grow up strong if they finish their trotters, and grown men swear the sticky broth will soothe aching joints and chase away the winter chill. There is no etiquette to eating a trotter. You grip it by the end, teeth and fingers working together. Children compete to see who can strip a foot cleanest, while adults lean against carts or lampposts, savoring the warmth and the salt. It is a messy, public ritual. A good vendor keeps a bucket for bones and a smile for anyone brave enough to gnaw the little ones near the ankle. The truly daring dip the feet in vinegar or douse them in pepper, adding heat and astringency to an already wild flavor. Sheep's trotters are social too, a snack shared on street corners, at the docks, or on the steps outside a factory.
For a penny, you buy both food and fellowship. There is always a joke about eating on the hoof or someone showing off their trotter technique. And when you are done, you toss the bones into the gutter, wipe your hands on your coat, and feel a strange sense of pride. As you finish, tongue searching for bits of gelatin still glued to your teeth, you realize you have eaten like a true Victorian Londoner, resourceful, unafraid, and never wasteful. You are full, if not completely satisfied, and ready to face whatever else the city has to throw at you. Because in London, the only thing tougher than the sheep's feet is the person chewing on them. Dangerous candies, a sweet gamble. Craving dessert? Cheap candies made from questionable sugars, wax, and the occasional toxic dye are handed out to children everywhere. They are bright, they are sweet, and if you survive childhood, your dentist will never forgive you. Picture yourself at the end of a long, gritty Victorian day. Pockets empty but for a single copper and the vague hope of something sweet. The air is chilly. The streets are a patchwork of shadows and gaslight, but at the corner, hope shimmers in glass jars. There stands the candy man, his mustache waxed, his fingers stained by the rainbow of treats he sells. His cart is a vision. Jars crammed with boiled sweets, sugar plums, ribbons of taffy, and hard candies in colors so bright you would need to squint. It is a glorious display, and also a chemical experiment gone rogue. Dangerous candies, a sweet gamble. Craving dessert? Cheap candies made from questionable sugars, wax, and the occasional toxic dye are handed out to children everywhere. They are bright, they are sweet, and if you survive childhood, your dentist will never forgive you. Picture yourself at the end of a long, gritty Victorian day. Pockets empty but for a single copper, and the vague hope of something sweet. The air is chilly. The streets are a patchwork of shadows and gaslight, but at the corner, hope shimmers in glass jars. There stands the candy man, his mustache waxed, his fingers stained by the rainbow of treats he sells. His cart is a vision, jars crammed with boiled sweets, sugar plums, ribbons of taffy, and hard candies in colors so bright you would need to squint. It is a glorious display, and also a chemical experiment gone rogue. You join the throng of children jostling for a glimpse, hands sticky from the last meal, eyes wide, coins clutched with a seriousness usually reserved for prayer. Each child waits for their turn to pick a penny's worth. The choices are endless, or so it seems. There are sugar plums, basically hardened balls of sugar, licorice whips, sometimes licorice, sometimes wishful thinking, and boiled sweets with a glossy shine and a center that may or may not contain anything close to actual flavor. You select a sugar plum. It rattles into your palm, suspiciously hard and suspiciously heavy for its size. The first lick is pure sweetness, followed by a sudden hit of what is that? Anise? Almond? Or is that just the taste of whatever dye was on sale? You keep sucking, savoring a faint tingle on your tongue that you hope is not the first sign of lead poisoning. In the world of Victorian candy, artificial flavor could mean almost anything, and artificial color sometimes meant actual poison. Bright reds from lead oxide, greens from copper, yellows from arsenic, all for the joy of eating a sweet that glows brighter than your hopes for adulthood. It is not just the ingredients that are questionable. The sugar itself might be mixed with flour, chalk, or even sawdust to stretch the profit margin. The shape could be irregular, the texture oddly crunchy, but for Victorian children, this is pure magic. A moment of pleasure in a world of hard bread, harder rules, and chores that never seem to end. You watch as a boy crunches a barley sugar twist, eyes lighting up despite the effort. Two girls share a licorice whip, daring each other to chew through the toughest bit. In the background, a mother warns her child, "Only 3, or you will lose your teeth before your birthday." The child nods and immediately buys 4. Candies are currency too, swapped and traded, hoarded in pockets, even used to settle playground bets or bribe a younger sibling. The market is bustling. The air is a symphony of giggles and sugar rush squeals. For a few moments, nobody cares that the sweets are as much danger as delight. Of course, the consequences come later. Dentists, those rare and fearsome professionals, spend their days pulling molars and sighing over blackened stumps. There are stories of children whose tongues turned blue, green, or allegedly fell off entirely. But most simply accept that a sweet is worth the risk. In a city where most meals are brown and boiled, a mouthful of neon sugar feels like a celebration. You finish your sugar plum, teeth a little sore, spirit just a touch brighter. You have tasted Victorian joy in its purest, most reckless form. As you wipe your hands on your coat and head home, you cannot help but grin. Just do not show your teeth. Oysters for everyone, until they run out. Oysters are everywhere, served raw or cooked, and cost less than a loaf of bread. Everyone eats them, until the Thames runs out, and suddenly oysters are for the rich again. Enjoy them while they last. It is another brisk day in Victorian London, and you are weaving through the crowd when you catch the unmistakable scent of brine and seaweed. At nearly every street corner, oyster carts and stalls gleam in the pale sunlight, shells stacked in precarious towers, a testament to just how much Londoners love their shellfish. You join the queue. Everyone does. Chimney sweeps, fishwives, dock workers, even the odd clerk with ink-stained fingers. This is democracy in action. The city's greatest equalizer is not the courtroom or the church, but the oyster stand. The vendor, apron streaked with seawater, works quickly, prying open shells with practiced ease. With a quick flick, he deposits the oyster onto a chipped plate, or, for those in a hurry, straight into your hand. Vinegar and pepper are offered for the adventurous. Some slurp their oysters raw, straight from the shell, seawater running down their chin. Others prefer them grilled, baked, or drowned in the infamous brown sauce. No matter the method, it is filling, protein-rich, and, most importantly, affordable, at least for now. Victorian oysters are not a delicacy, but a daily staple. The Thames is so full of them that even the poorest can feast. They are sometimes mixed into pies, tossed into stews, or served atop thick slices of bread, what passes for oyster toast in the homes of those who cannot remember the taste of beef. Children crunch shells between their teeth. Adults claim oysters give strength to the legs, and there are rumors they even ward off winter colds. Every meal is improved with an oyster or six. The taste is, in a word, bold. Oysters from the Thames are briny and a little muddy, with a flavor that hints at the river's many secrets. A good oyster is slippery, cold, and gone in a gulp. A bad oyster is memorable for days, sometimes in ways you would rather forget. But Londoners are stoic. If it is fresh, it is food. If it is questionable, well, so is half the city's cuisine. Yet, as with all things in London, change is coming. The more the city grows, the more it takes from the river. Oysters become harder to find. Prices creep higher, and before long, what was once a poor man's meal becomes the mark of wealth. The carts dwindle, the crowds thin, and the best oysters are sent upriver to fancy restaurants, places with white tablecloths, and people who ask, "Are these local?" But for now, you savor your meal, shell after shell. The chatter around you is a symphony of slurps and sighs, a chorus of the satisfied and the soon-to-be full. Children run back for seconds, workers debate the best stall, and the vendor shucks on, hands moving with the rhythm of the city itself. You finish your last oyster, wiping your fingers on your coat, the briny taste lingering long after. It is not glamorous, but it is yours. A hot meal, a cold shell, and a fleeting sense of plenty. Tomorrow the price may rise. Next year, only the rich might afford them. But tonight, at least, you have eaten like a king on a pauper's coin. As you step back into the press of the street, you hear the call of another oyster vendor. Maybe you will have just one more, for luck. In Victorian London, you take your luxuries where you find them, even if they come wrapped in a shell and flavored with the river's own secrets. Meat pies, the mystery continues. At the local pie shop, you order a meat pie and immediately regret asking what is inside. Could be mutton, could be pigeon, could be something that was just flying by. Either way, it is filling, probably. It is mid-afternoon, and you find yourself shuffling into a cramped little pie shop. The door swinging shut behind you with a clang that is half welcome, half warning. The air is thick with the smell of flour, suet, and the faintest whiff of something you can only describe as mystery. The pie counter gleams, stacked with golden brown pastries of every shape and size, their crusts bursting with promise, or possibly just steam. The woman behind the counter greets you with a brisk, businesslike nod. Her arms are dusted in flour, and she moves with the authority of someone who spent her entire life making sure nobody gets an extra slice for free. You slide your coin across the counter and point to a meat pie, trying not to sound too hopeful or too nervous. She wraps it in a square of yesterday's newspaper and hands it over with a smile that is equal parts pride and secret. You step aside, clutching your warm, hefty prize, and take a cautious bite. The pastry is thick, buttery, and just the right side of tough, designed to withstand travel, hunger, and Victorian dentistry. The filling is piping hot, an aromatic mix of spices and meat, or at least something that once resembled meat. Sometimes it is the robust, slightly gamey flavor of mutton, hearty, rich, and just chewy enough to give your jaw a workout. On other days, the flavor is lighter, sweeter, and faintly reminiscent of feathers, the telltale sign you have bitten into pigeon pie. Pigeon is, after all, everywhere in London. They perch on statues, flutter in alleys, and occasionally end up inside a pie if they are not careful. In Victorian kitchens, nothing goes to waste, and a pie is the great equalizer. Anything from offcuts of lamb to street-savvy birds can disappear beneath a blanket of pastry, transformed into a dish that is equal parts necessity and invention. You chew thoughtfully, eyes darting over your fellow diners. Some eat standing at the counter, tearing into their pies with gusto and little concern for what lurks inside. Others sit on wooden stools, eyes closed in concentration, savoring every mouthful as if deciphering a secret code. There is camaraderie in the unknown.
No one truly knows what they are eating, and that is just the way the city likes it. Pie shops are the heart of working-class London, their windows fogged from baking, their counters crowded. They hum with gossip, laughter, and the occasional heated debate about which shop has the flakiest crust or the richest gravy. The pies themselves are practical miracles, portable, durable, and nearly indestructible. They are breakfast, lunch, and dinner, sometimes all in one if your week has been particularly long. Inside, the filling is a marvel of Victorian thrift. Chopped onions, a few cubes of potato, maybe a carrot or two for color, all blended with scraps of whatever meat the cook could source. Occasionally, you hit a chunk of something unexpected, a bit of bone, a sliver of gristle, the odd shot pellet if the pigeons were especially fresh. The gravy is thick and peppery, clinging to the meat and seeping into the pastry, disguising any ingredient that might be a little past its prime. Children hover by the counter, noses pressed to the glass, eyeing the pies like treasure. Factory workers grab two at a time, washing them down with a cup of weak tea. Even the city's stray dogs lurk outside, hoping for a crust or two tossed their way. Every bite is a small leap of faith, a culinary gamble, and a reminder that in Victorian London, a full stomach is sometimes the only luxury that matters. You finish your pie, wiping the crumbs from your coat, not much wiser about what you have just eaten, but entirely satisfied. Maybe it was mutton, maybe pigeon, maybe something that made a wrong turn near the kitchen door. It hardly matters. In the grand tradition of London's pie shops, the secret is safe, and so is your appetite. For now.
Dripping toast. Grease as a virtue. Forget butter. This toast is buttered with beef dripping, the collected fat from the previous night's roast. It is greasy, it is salty, and it is either delicious or your cardiologist's worst nightmare. It is early morning in Victorian London. The city is just beginning to stir. Street sweepers yawning, horses clopping past, and the first wafts of coal smoke curling up into the gray sky. Your stomach growls, demanding something warm and substantial. At the corner of the market, you spot your salvation. A small, bustling stall with a sign that reads simply, "Dripping toast, a farthing a slice." You get in line behind factory hands, errand boys, and a respectable-looking woman in a shawl who clearly knows a good deal when she sees one. The vendor is a marvel of multitasking. One hand wielding a thick loaf of yesterday's bread, the other ladling golden, shimmering beef dripping from a battered tin. The bread is sliced thick, dropped onto a well-used griddle, and doused in hot fat that sizzles and seeps through every crumb. If you are lucky, you get a slice with a few crispy bits, flecks of roasted onion, a shred or two of beef, or the elusive jelly that forms at the bottom of the dripping pot, prized by children and adults with strong constitutions alike. You accept your dripping toast with both hands. The paper it is served on becomes translucent in moments, and a river of fat threatens to run down your wrist if you do not eat quickly. You bite in. First a crisp edge, then the soft hot center, and finally the undeniable punch of salt, umami, and guilt. This is not food for the faint-hearted. It is food for those who need to work, who need fuel, who do not have time for the niceties of butter or the luxury of jam. Every bite is an edible engine, stoking the fires for another day in the factory, at the docks, or simply enduring the cold. There is no polite way to eat dripping toast. It coats your lips in a glossy sheen, leaves your fingers greasy, and may or may not leave a telltale stain on your shirt. The regulars, unbothered, eat standing up, balancing mugs of weak tea or the ever-present mug of questionable coffee. You see children dunking their slices, savoring the way the bread soaks up every last drop, while their mothers swipe the crusts clean with a practiced, loving efficiency. For many Londoners, dripping is more than breakfast. It is survival. In homes where meat is a rare luxury, every scrap of fat is carefully saved. After the Sunday roast, the dripping is strained, cooled, and scraped into a jar for the week ahead. Housewives guard their supply like treasure, doling it out for toast, for frying, or for the children's sandwiches. Some even add a pinch of salt or a sprinkle of pepper, turning simple fat into a flavor bomb worthy of memory. There are variations, of course. On the best mornings, the dripping is rich and beefy, flecked with savory bits from the pan. On leaner days, it is stretched with lard, a little flour, or a suspiciously thick layer of bread for texture. Some swear by adding a dash of vinegar or even a bit of mustard, cutting through the richness with a burst of tang. The health risks? Let us just say nobody talks about cholesterol, and the concept of good fat is still a century away. The only thing that matters is calories and the strength to get through another day. Dripping toast is cheap, filling, and gloriously decadent. In a world where most luxuries are out of reach, you finish your breakfast, fingers shining, heart pounding, and lips tingling with salt. You wipe your hands on your trousers, thank the vendor, and step back into the swirl of city life, a little heavier, a little stronger, and maybe, just maybe, a little happier. Because in Victorian London, breakfast is not about refinement or restraint. It is about making the most of what you have, feeding your hunger, and savoring every greasy, glorious bite before the world demands everything you have got. Fried Fish Friday, the birth of a tradition. Friday night means fried fish, served from street stands, wrapped in old newsprint, and smelling faintly of yesterday's headlines. A meal for the masses and the future inspiration for fish and chips, minus the chips. The sun has just set over Victorian London, and the streets are alive with the kind of buzz that only comes when the work week ends and hunger sets in. Lamps flicker, and the fog swirls just enough to make the city seem mysterious and new. You weave through the crowds, your path illuminated by the orange glow of street lanterns and the even brighter beacon of a battered frying cart. Here, a crowd of Londoners gathers, clutching coins and sniffing the air like hopeful bloodhounds. This is the fried fish stand, the true people's restaurant. The air is thick with the scent of sizzling oil and something delightfully crispy. The vendor, a wiry man in a flour-stained apron and a hat that may once have been white, works the griddle with lightning speed. He dunks fillets of white fish, if you are lucky, cod or plaice, if you are not, river special, in a simple batter and lets them sizzle in a vat of hot fat until they emerge golden and hissing. With the practiced flick of his tongs, he drains the excess oil and deposits each steaming fillet onto a square of old newspaper, headlines and all. You pay your penny, take your parcel, and try not to burn your fingers as you bite in. The crust is crisp and shatters with each bite. The inside is moist, flaky, and carries the unmistakable tang of London's rivers, sometimes reassuring, sometimes not. Each mouthful is salted generously, and if the vendor is feeling generous, you might get a splash of malt vinegar, which cuts through the grease with a sharp, nostalgic bite. There is no greater equalizer than the fried fish stand. The queue is a jumble of city life. Laborers in flat caps, maids on a rare evening out, nannies with sticky-fingered charges, even the odd clerk in a crumpled suit, all united by a shared craving for something hot, filling, and affordable. There is no cutlery, no seating, and certainly no pretensions. Here you eat with your hands and wipe your lips on your sleeve if you are fancy. Fried fish is London's first real fast food, and it shows. The vendor keeps the line moving, shouting over the sizzle, sometimes tossing scraps to a passing stray dog or offering a crisp tail to a child with extra-wide eyes. The newsprint wrapper soaks up the grease, doubles as reading material, and, after you are finished, becomes an accidental handkerchief, or, in some cases, a makeshift hat for the bold or desperate. The taste lingers long after the fish is gone, equal parts comfort and cholesterol.
Some say the oil improves with age, giving each batch of fish a unique, if slightly mysterious, character. Others claim the real secret is in the batter, a closely guarded mix of flour, water, and maybe just a pinch of last week's leftovers. But the truth is simpler. Hunger makes everything taste better, especially when it is hot and eaten outdoors, surrounded by laughter and the endless stories of a city that never really sleeps. For many Londoners, this is the week's highlight, a chance to eat something fried, something festive, and, for a moment, forget the grind of work, the worries at home, or the state of one's shoes. You eat slowly, savoring each greasy, crunchy bite, licking salt from your lips and trying to read the backwards headlines through the translucent paper. As the crowd drifts away, you toss your empty wrapper into the gutter, recycling Victorian style, feeling warm, full, and just a little bit greasy. The city continues to bustle, but for now, your hunger is sated and your spirit just a little lighter. In Victorian London, a meal could be many things: adventurous, questionable, occasionally unidentifiable. But on Friday nights, thanks to a battered cart and a brave soul with a vat of oil, it could also be deliciously, democratically fried. Stewed giblets. Everything the butcher could not sell. In a city where nothing is wasted, stewed giblets, hearts, livers, gizzards, make up the stew du jour. It is nutritious, economical, and best eaten with your eyes closed. It is a damp evening in Victorian London, and you follow the aroma of simmering meat through narrow, foggy streets until you find a small, bustling stall tucked between a bakery and a coal yard. The air is thick with the scent of onions, herbs, and boiled meat, an aroma that is simultaneously comforting, alarming, and slightly mysterious. A crowd has gathered, bowls and mugs clutched in hands that are already warm from the steam rising from the cauldron. Each person waits patiently, knowing that whatever comes out of that pot, it will fill both stomach and soul. The vendor, a rotund man with flour-dusted hands and an apron mottled with broth, ladles a generous portion into your bowl. The stew is thick, brown, and packed with chewy chunks of organ meat. Pale, tender hearts, firm livers, and the odd knobbly gizzard floating in a rich, savory broth. A few stray root vegetables bob between the pieces, unidentifiable to the untrained eye, but adding just enough substance to make the meal feel wholesome. The steam curls up and warms your face, carrying hints of thyme, pepper, and the faintest suggestion of optimism. You take your first bite, cautious. The heart is tender, slightly metallic, and full of a robust flavor that reminds you vaguely of a Sunday roast, if your Sunday roast included parts of the animal that most modern kitchens would politely ignore. The liver melts under your teeth, rich and earthy, while the gizzard offers a chewy contrast, its fibrous texture a challenge that somehow makes you feel stronger for having overcome it. The broth is thick enough to coat the spoon, salty enough to awaken every taste bud, and surprisingly soothing in the chill evening air. Stewed giblets are the triumph of thrift and ingenuity. Every component is designed to stretch the value of the animal as far as it can go. Hearts, kidneys, liver, trimmed fat, everything finds its way into the mix, shaped carefully into spheres, and simmered to a soft, yielding texture.
It is a dish made by necessity, perfected by experience, and embraced by those who understand that comfort sometimes comes in slightly unusual forms. The flavor is complex, rich, and hearty, the very embodiment of working-class resilience on a plate. Around you, the crowd is a lively mixture of anticipation and acceptance. Factory workers slurp eagerly, wiping their lips on sleeves and arguing about which vendor has the best stock. Children tiptoe around the cauldron, fascinated by the sight of floating organs, and mothers encourage the brave ones to take a bigger spoonful. There is camaraderie here, born of shared hunger and mutual tolerance for a stew that asks you to set aside your preconceptions and simply eat. Every spoonful teaches resilience. You chew, swallow, and discover that there is a rhythm to the dish. The hearts for strength, the liver for flavor, the gizzard for endurance. The broth itself binds everything together, a soothing reminder that even scraps, when treated with care and patience, can become sustenance. It is messy, it is fragrant, it is challenging, and it is undeniably human. When your bowl is empty, your fingers sticky, and your coat warm with steam, you feel a quiet sense of accomplishment. You have eaten stewed giblets, survived their textures and flavors, and come out the other side nourished and oddly satisfied. In a city where survival is often improvised and luxury rare, this stew proves that nothing is wasted, nothing is forgotten, and even the most humble parts of the animal can provide warmth, sustenance, and a story to tell. And as you step back into the misty street, the scent lingering in your coat and the warmth spreading through your chest, you realize that in Victorian London, even the scraps are a feast. Rice milk and almond water, the gentle alternatives. You are thirsty, but beware. Rice milk and almond water are popular alternatives, sometimes flavored with real ingredients, sometimes just water with a whiff of almond. If it smells like marzipan, you are probably fine. It is mid-morning in Victorian London, and the fog hangs low over the cobbled streets. Your stomach has been filled by whatever humble provisions you could find, but your throat demands something soothing, something that will not challenge the patience of your digestive system. Street vendors call out their wares: hot tea, fresh coffee, rice milk, and almond water. And you gravitate toward the last, curious about this mild, creamy alternative to the more robust options. You approach the stall, a wooden cart adorned with glass jugs and a few chipped mugs. The aroma, delicate and sweet, like marzipan and distant summer orchards. The vendor, a middle-aged woman with a flower-streaked apron, nods at you with the confidence of someone who has served hundreds of curious customers before breakfast. She ladles a pale liquid into your cup and adds a swirl of sugar if you ask politely, then hands it over with a wink. "Careful," she murmurs, "it is lighter than milk, but it has spirit." You take a cautious sip. The rice milk is thin but surprisingly satisfying, creamy without the weight of cow's milk. It carries a subtle sweetness, the sort that does not overwhelm but lingers pleasantly on the tongue. Almond water is sharper, slightly floral, and, if prepared well, fragrant enough to momentarily distract from the city's coal and smoke. Both drinks are designed to hydrate, soothe, and provide just enough energy for another morning of trudging along the foggy streets. These beverages were essential for Londoners, who either could not afford dairy or preferred a gentler alternative. Rice milk, often prepared from boiled rice and water, was a staple for the poor or infirm. Almond water, made from ground almonds soaked and strained, was considered nutritious and even restorative, though its quality varied wildly from vendor to vendor. Some added sugar, some flavored it with rosewater or vanilla, while others, less scrupulous, offered only diluted water with a ghost of almond aroma. Every sip was a gamble, and every cup an adventure in taste and tolerance. Around you, the street hums with life. Children clutch small mugs, delighted by the sweetness and novelty. Factory workers pause briefly, cradling their cups in gloved hands, enjoying the warmth that seeps into their fingers. Housewives chat quietly, trading tips on stretching almond water for a larger family breakfast. Regulars know which vendor's batch is best, who dilutes the least, and whose mixture will leave a gritty residue on your tongue, a test of both skill and bravery. Drinking rice milk or almond water is as much about ritual as refreshment. You sip slowly, letting the warmth and flavor settle, noticing the steam rising from your cup,
curling around the letters of the newspaper used as a makeshift coaster. Each mouthful is comforting, a small indulgence in a world otherwise dominated by gristle, meat scraps, and uncertainty. The street around you continues its rhythm. Carts rumble, bells clang, horses shuffle by, and the occasional stray dog pads silently between the legs of hurried pedestrians. By the time you finish, your fingers are warm and sticky from drips, your tongue tingling slightly from the sweetness, and your stomach content.
You have survived the gamble of Victorian non-dairy beverages. Hydrated, a little nourished, and oddly satisfied. The taste lingers, faintly nutty and sweet, a reminder of ingenuity in a city that often thrives on improvisation. As you step away from the cart and back into the foggy street, you glance at the jugs and imagine the next person, thirsty and weary, hoping their cup will contain real almond essence and not just a whiff of hope. And you smile, knowing you have tasted Victorian resilience, one careful sip at a time. Pig's head brawn, the wobbly centerpiece. It is party time. The centerpiece is a molded dish made from the head of a pig, boiled until everything sets into a wobbly, savory jelly. Nothing says celebration like a dish that stares back. You enter the modest, candlelit parlor where the party is already humming. The furniture is a mix of well-worn chairs and patched benches, and the room smells of a dozen simmering dishes. Roast potatoes, onions, the faint tang of overworked lard, and, of course, the unmistakable aroma of pig's head brawn. On the table, in all its gelatinous glory, sits the centerpiece, a wobbly, shimmering mass flecked with tender meat, savory herbs, and the occasional unidentifiable morsel. It jiggles gently as someone bumps the table, a reminder that it is alive in spirit, if not in body. The pig's head has been boiled with care. Every ounce of flesh scraped from the bones and folded back into the gelatin that forms naturally from the simmered skin and cartilage. It is a triumph of resourcefulness, a dish that proves the Victorians had a deep appreciation for both thrift and drama. The top layer glistens, catching the candlelight and reflecting the eyes of the guests like a mild culinary stare-down. Children inch closer, daring each other to touch it, while adults offer the occasional impressed nod, murmuring about tradition, flavor, and how the wobbly texture is somehow comforting if you ignore the origin. You grab a fork, tentative, and slide it under a piece. The slice quivers as if it knows you are about to eat it, wobbling dramatically before it finally succumbs to gravity. The first bite is rich, deeply porky, and slightly salty. The gelatin surrounds the meat like a savory cushion, softening the chew and amplifying the flavor. Bits of cheek, a smidge of ear, and the occasional jewel remind you exactly what you are eating. But the taste is familiar, hearty, and oddly celebratory. With each mouthful, you understand why this dish has earned its place at so many gatherings. It is simultaneously economical, filling, and a spectacle. The room hums with conversation as people help themselves, dipping bread into the wobbly jelly to scoop up extra flavor, comparing textures, and passing around condiments like mustard or pickles to adjust the taste. The children, emboldened by sugar from earlier treats, dare each other to eat larger slices, while the adults discreetly observe, offering encouragement or mild horror. Everyone participates in this ritual, understanding that the pig's head brawn is more than food. It is entertainment, sustenance, and a sign that the household has pulled together for a proper Victorian gathering. The gelatinous nature of the dish encourages a slower pace. Guests cannot rush, for each piece must be carefully sliced and lifted without toppling the delicate balance. Conversation is naturally measured, punctuated by gentle laughter and the occasional ooh or ah when a particularly large or jiggly portion is served. The wobbly centerpiece demands attention, even admiration, as it quietly asserts itself at the heart of the table. It is a dish that commands patience, respect, and an adventurous palate. The flavors deepen, the savory richness of pork combined with aromatic herbs, softened by the gentle embrace of jelly. The texture varies, from tender meat to more resilient morsels, offering a mini adventure with each bite. It is a lesson in Victorian ingenuity, how nothing went to waste, how scraps could be transformed into something elegant, and how even the most humble ingredients could shine at a celebration. When the final slice is eaten and the table wiped down, you step back with a satisfied sense of triumph. You have partaken in a dish that is equal parts spectacle and sustenance, survived the wobbly texture, and understood why pig's head brawn was once considered the height of culinary creativity. As you leave the room, the gentle aroma lingers on your fingers and clothes, a reminder of a meal both strange and delightful, nourishing body and imagination alike. When the final slice is eaten and the table wiped down, you step back with a satisfied sense of triumph. You have partaken in a dish that is equal parts spectacle and sustenance, survived the wobbly texture, and understood why pig's head brawn was once considered the height of culinary creativity. As you leave the room, the gentle aroma lingers on your fingers and clothes, a reminder of a meal both strange and delightful, nourishing body and imagination alike. Ketchup without tomatoes, the fungal alternative. You reach for some ketchup to improve your food, only to discover it is made from mushrooms, anchovies, or even walnuts. Tomatoes are a luxury, and real ketchup is a rare treat. It is lunchtime in Victorian London, and your stomach is ready for a little excitement, preferably edible. You glance at the table, where a haphazard assortment of pies, boiled meats, and breadcrumbs awaits. Something about the scene whispers, this could use a little zing.
Naturally, your eyes settle on the bottle of ketchup, its label promising flavor, salvation, and a dash of culinary adventure. You tip it toward your plate and immediately pause, catching the scent. Earthy, pungent, and vaguely fishy. Something is not quite right. Victorian ketchup is a slippery slope. Unlike the modern tomato-based sauce you know and love, this sauce is a patchwork of ingredients designed to stretch expensive staples and keep flavors interesting, or at least edible. Mushroom ketchup is the most common, a dark, earthy liquid crafted from fermented fungi, salt, and vinegar. It is rich, strong, and hits your tongue with a savory intensity that makes you question whether you are improving your meal or merely participating in an elaborate taste test. But mushrooms are just the beginning. Anchovy ketchup lurks in other bottles, delivering a briny punch so fierce that it could double as a wake-up call for your digestive system. Walnuts, fermented and seasoned, provide a nutty depth that no one really asked for, but somehow seems culturally appropriate. The concept of consistency is foreign. Each bottle, each batch, each street vendor's jug is a gamble. You could end up with something delightfully complex or a sauce that smells like it has more stories than the local pub. The history behind ketchup explains a lot. Imported tomatoes were expensive, seasonal, and unpredictable in quality. Mushroom, walnut, and anchovy ketchups were inventive substitutes, affordable, shelf-stable, and more than a little daring. They were also an opportunity for foodies to showcase resilience. If you survived a meal with anchovy ketchup, you were officially a connoisseur of Victorian ingenuity, or at least a brave eater. You tentatively pour a small dollop over your pie and take a cautious bite. The mushroom base hits first, earthy, dense, unrepentant. Then the vinegar comes forward, cutting through the richness of your pie with surprising force. Your taste buds recoil, and then settle, uncertain whether to be grateful or alarmed. Across the table, other diners are experiencing their own brand of culinary roulette. A boy gags slightly on walnut ketchup. A woman nods approvingly at mushroom, and someone in the corner is silently mourning the lack of actual tomato flavor. Ketchup in Victorian London was also a social statement. The more adventurous the eater, the higher the prestige, at least among peers who understood that flavor could be both creative and hazardous. Vendors boasted of secret recipes, whispered about infusions of clove, cinnamon, or other spices that transformed the sauce into a miniature adventure with every pour. It was a street-side experiment, a conversation starter, and occasionally a mild digestive challenge. Despite, or perhaps because of, its unpredictability, ketchup thrived.
It improved dishes, masked flavors, and offered variety in a world where meals could otherwise be monotonous. Children learned to accept the odd tang. Adults developed strategies for pairing it with pies or meat, and everyone nodded solemnly when someone declared, "It is good if you ignore the fish." By the time you finish your meal, your tongue tingling and your curiosity slightly satisfied, you realize that ketchup has become more than a condiment. It is an emblem of Victorian creativity, frugality, and daring. In a city where tomatoes were a luxury and flavor was negotiable, you have tasted history. Complex, messy, and occasionally shocking, but utterly memorable. And as you step back into the foggy London streets, you think the next time someone complains about modern condiments, they clearly have not lived through a bottle of mushroom, anchovy, and walnut ketchup served with a smile and a side of unpredictability. Pickled everything, crunch and risk. You eye the fruit vendor, but those apples have seen better days. Pickled vegetables in barrels line the street, promising crunch and tang, plus a mystery tingle that might just be botulism. It is mid-afternoon in Victorian London, and the market is a cacophony of shouts, clattering carts, and the occasional bark of a stray dog. You weave between pedestrians, drawn to the bright colors of fruit piled high on a small wooden stall. The apples are bruised, the pears slightly spotted, and the plums leaning precariously into one another. Despite appearances, this is considered perfectly acceptable. If the fruit can be eaten without immediate consequence, it is fair game. Children tug at their mother's skirts, begging for a taste, while errand boys nudge each other aside in pursuit of the shiniest specimen. The vendor, a woman with knotted hair tucked beneath a sun-faded bonnet, smiles through her wrinkles and waves a gnarled hand over the produce. She offers advice. "These are fine today, best eaten with vinegar, I say." Behind her, barrels bulge with pickled vegetables, cucumbers, carrots, cabbage, onions, even the occasional mysterious root. The brine is thick, cloudy, and redolent of vinegar, salt, and the city itself. You hesitate for a moment, noting the curious shimmer on the surface. Some of it is fat, some sediment, and some, well, that is the question. You pick up a pickled cucumber. It crunches satisfyingly. The vinegar biting at your tongue while the salt leaves your lips tingling. You suspect it has been pickled longer than you have been alive, but the flavor is bold and strangely comforting. You glance around at the other customers. A dock worker shoves a carrot in his mouth with determined efficiency. A small boy gingerly nibbles at a cabbage leaf, and a mother carefully cuts her daughter's portion into manageable pieces, clearly hoping that the child's stomach can handle the adventure. The occasional cough or grimace is overlooked. In this city, flavor sometimes comes with consequences. Pickled vegetables are an exercise in improvisation. The Victorians preserve whatever they can find, ensuring that nothing goes to waste. Cabbage cores, carrot peels, even slightly wilted herbs are packed into brine, salted, and left to ferment. The result is crunchy, tangy, and, depending on luck, a minor digestive challenge. Some barrels contain slightly overzealous fermentations, while others are safer, albeit still slightly suspicious. It is a gamble each time you bite. Fruit, on the other hand, is simple but delicate. The apples may be bruised, but beneath the rough exterior is sweetness, the occasional tart note, and the faint taste of orchards long past. Pears, plums, and gooseberries are treated similarly, offered at a low price to the poor and brave. Children love the challenge of picking the least spotted piece, while adults calculate which fruit will survive their journey home. Every purchase carries a story, and every bite is part of the adventure. The market is alive with noise, smells, and tiny dramas. Vendors shout, people haggle, and the occasional cat dashes between stalls, hoping for a dropped scrap. Meanwhile, you nibble your cucumber and chew thoughtfully, aware that each mouthful is a combination of nourishment and daring. In a world where food is not always predictable, the crunch of pickled vegetables and the bite of slightly bruised fruit is a reminder that life itself is both risky and delicious. As you finish, you carefully replace the paper wrapping, brush off your fingers, and step back into the crowded street. Your mouth tingles from the pickles, your stomach is comforted by fruit, and your spirit is a little braver than before. In Victorian London, snacks can be adventurous, meals can be suspicious, and yet somehow every bite is worth it, at least until the next alley, the next vendor, and the next unexpected flavor adventure calls. A penny ice, the gamble of summer. Summer brings penny ice, frozen water flavored with syrup, or, if you are unlucky, with something that tastes like the inside of a chemistry lab. Eat fast before it melts, or before you lose your nerve. It is the height of summer in Victorian London, and the streets are sweltering under a sun that barely penetrates the ever-present haze of smoke and fog. Children, street vendors, and curious adults alike gather at the corners where the penny ice carts gleam like little islands of relief. The vendors call out with enthusiasm, "Penny ice, refreshment for a halfpenny!" Steam, or is it just heat distortion, rises in waves from the surrounding pavements, creating an illusion of ocean mist in the middle of the city. You approach cautiously. The cart is a simple wooden structure with a glass display case, inside of which blocks of frozen ice are meticulously shaved into thin sheets. Syrup bottles in every color imaginable line the top, ranging from bright cherry red to a suspiciously vibrant green. The vendor, a wiry man with flour-streaked hands from yesterday's pies, deftly shaves the ice. The fine snow piling into a little mound in a cup, then drizzles it with syrup. The first swirl you see glistens like molten candy, but you know better. In London, syrup is a suggestion rather than a guarantee, and some flavors are experimental. You hand over your penny and receive a pale cone of shaved ice, syrup dripping dangerously over the edges. You take your first tentative lick, immediately cooling your tongue and causing a shiver to race down your spine. The flavor is intense, sweet, sharp, and somewhere between fruit and chemistry. Lemon, raspberry, peppermint, it could be any or none. The truth is, part of the adventure is the unknown, the thrill of biting into something that may delight or revolt. You lick quickly, aware that the ice is melting fast in your warm hand, leaving a sticky trail on your fingers. Penny ice is more than refreshment. It is a gamble. Children clutch their coins with white knuckles, daring each other to try the strange blue or the mysterious green, both of which are rumored to taste faintly metallic. Adults watch, amused or cautious, while factory workers pause briefly to enjoy a fleeting moment of cool before returning to their endless labor. The vendor moves efficiently, scraping off shavings and ladling syrup with practiced precision, occasionally offering a double swirl for the bravest customer. The textures are part of the challenge. The ice is crunchy, sometimes gritty, and always melting, forcing you to eat quickly. Drips run down your hand, soaking the corner of your sleeve or leaving a sticky streak on your coat. Penny ice is more than refreshment. It is a gamble. Children clutch their coins with white knuckles, daring each other to try the strange blue or the mysterious green, both of which are rumored to taste faintly metallic. Adults watch, amused or cautious, while factory workers pause briefly to enjoy a fleeting moment of cool before returning to their endless labor. The vendor moves efficiently, scraping off shavings and ladling syrup with practiced precision, occasionally offering a double swirl for the bravest customer. The textures are part of the challenge. The ice is crunchy, sometimes gritty, and always melting, forcing you to eat quickly. Drips run down your hand, soaking the corner of your sleeve or leaving a sticky streak on your coat. The syrup soaks into your tongue, coating taste buds in intense sweetness and occasionally a hint of bitter experimentation. In a city where few meals are truly indulgent, penny ice is both a thrill and a respite, a fleeting luxury affordable even to the poorest. Vendors have their own reputations. Some are known for clean ice, properly flavored syrup, and generous portions. Others are less reliable, with flavors that could have been concocted in a chemistry lab gone wrong, or ice that melts before reaching your lips. Choosing where to buy becomes a game of observation, rumor, and luck, with each corner card offering a slightly different adventure. By the time you finish, your fingers are cold and sticky, your tongue tingling, and your spirits slightly lifted. The ice has melted into a sweet puddle in your cup, but the experience remains. Penny ice is a triumph of simple ingenuity, frozen water, flavored syrup, and a touch of courage, offering a small, refreshing rebellion against the heat and grime of the city. As you wander back into the crowded streets, sticky fingers drying in the sun, you feel oddly victorious. You survived penny ice, London's cheapest, coolest, and most unpredictable summer treat, and your taste buds are none the worse for wear, though your memory will forever hold the hint of that mysterious green. Coffee or not, the morning mystery. You grab a hot drink from a coffee stall, but do not be fooled. It might be coffee, or it might be a blend of roasted chicory, burnt bread, and roasted peas. It is hot, it is brown, and it wakes you up by sheer confusion. It is early morning in Victorian London, and the fog has settled over the cobbled streets like a damp gray blanket. Your stomach demands warmth, your eyes demand caffeine, and your senses brace for the experience only a street coffee stall can provide. You follow the smell, a combination of roasting, smoke, and that indefinable morning in the city aroma, to a small wooden cart painted a faded green. Steam rises from the large urn on top, curling and swirling into the chill air. A sign reads, in bold, slightly uneven letters, "Hot coffee, 1 penny a cup." You pause. Coffee, you think? Hopefully. The vendor, a wiry man with sleeves rolled up and hair that might once have been black, stirs the dark liquid in the urn with a spoon that has seen better days. He scoops and pours with authority, filling chipped porcelain mugs that wobble in your hands. The first sip surprises you. It is hot, that is guaranteed, but the flavor is complicated. Roasted chicory dominates, bitter and woody, while hints of burnt bread hide in the background, offering both texture and slight alarm. Somewhere beneath it all, you detect roasted peas, giving the drink a faintly nutty undertone. Is this coffee? Possibly. Is it drinkable? Almost certainly. Will it wake you up? Absolutely. Coffee stalls like this are a staple of the working city. Factory hands clutch their mugs before a long shift. Apprentices sip quickly on their way to deliveries, and mothers pause to warm their frozen fingers. It is less about taste and more about function, heat, caffeine, and the psychological comfort of holding a hot vessel in the fog. The flavor may vary wildly from stall to stall, from day to day, but the ritual remains the same. Around you, the street is alive. Horses clatter past, cartwheels squeak, and vendors shout over the morning hum, hawking bread, milk, or newspapers. Patrons sip their brown beverages, eyes half closed, waiting for the warmth to reach their bones. Some have mastered the art of disguise, adding a pinch of sugar, a splash of milk, or the faintest hope of chocolate from yesterday's baker. The uninitiated drink straight, embracing the bitterness and resilience required to survive another day. There is a small performance to the coffee stall experience. The vendor moves with precision, balancing cups, ladles, and a thick cloth for spills. Occasionally, he slides a cup across the counter for a customer who catches it with an athletic flair that is impressive only in context. Behind the counter, you notice the urn's contents are never entirely uniform. Dark layers, sediment floating on top, and a sheen that suggests both oil and mystery. This is expected. Uniformity is for tea houses, not the streets. Children hover around, curious and wide-eyed. Some ask politely for a taste, receiving only a small sip, which they swallow with tentative smiles and slightly confused expressions. The older workers sip slowly, savoring the warmth, counting the minutes until their next break, or simply letting the aroma remind them that mornings, however grim, can be survived. By the time you finish your mug, your fingers are warm, your mouth tingles from the strong roasted flavors, and your spirit is oddly fortified. The liquid has done its work. You are awake, alert, and slightly bewildered, prepared to face the day's fog, coal, and cobblestones. Street coffee may not be refined, may not taste consistent, and may have ingredients you would never imagine in a cup of coffee, but it delivers. It is hot, brown, and oddly comforting. As you step back into the bustling street, the steam rising behind you like a halo of vigilance, you realize you have participated in a ritual older than many of the city's buildings. The coffee may not be true coffee, but it is the elixir of Victorian resilience, harsh, robust, and entirely unforgettable. The Chop House. Luxury with gristle. For a treat, you splurge at a chop house, where steaks sizzle on the grill and the staff pretend not to notice the cut is mostly gristle. It is a taste of luxury, Victorian style. You step through the door of the chop house, immediately greeted by a wall of heat, smoke, and the rich aroma of seared meat. The interior is dark, paneled in deep wood, with benches worn smooth by generations of diners, and tables that wobble just enough to remind you that precision is not part of the charm. The clatter of cutlery, the hiss of the grill, and the murmur of conversation combine into a symphony of hunger, anticipation, and subtle chaos. The staff are a curious breed. Waiters move briskly, balancing plates of steaming meat with the grace of tightrope walkers, while pretending not to notice that some cuts are more tendon than flesh. The cooks behind the counter flip steaks with a practiced flick, ignoring the occasional squeal from a gristle-laden piece landing on the floor. Here, in a chop house, imperfection is expected, and enthusiasm makes up for it. You take a seat at a corner table, rubbing your hands together to warm them against the chill outside. The menu is simple: steak, steak and kidney pie, mutton chops, maybe a kidney or two for the adventurous. The offerings are honest, if bluntly described.
You order a steak, fully aware that half of it may require chewing, jaw strength, and a small prayer for tenderness. Within minutes, your meal arrives, sizzling on a metal platter. The steak is thick, aromatic, and dripping with its own juices, which run down onto the plate with a sizzling flourish. The aroma alone is enough to make you reconsider whether you really needed breakfast earlier. You grab your knife and cut a slice, noting the layers of muscle, gristle, and fat that make up what the chop house calls a prime cut. The first bite is rich and beefy, smoky from the open flame, and oddly satisfying despite the chewiness of the tougher fibers. Chop houses were the working-class equivalent of a night at the theater. You could watch, listen, and participate in the performance of eating. Around you, men in flat caps converse over their meals, comparing how their steaks are cooked, debating the merits of extra salt, and occasionally trading stories about misadventures in meat markets. Women, perhaps enjoying a rare night out, nibble carefully, savoring the gravy that pools around the base of the plate. Children, if allowed inside, are given morsels with a mixture of caution and pride. The side dishes, while simple, are thoughtfully executed. Thick slices of bread soak up the juices, and onions roasted in the pan add a caramelized sweetness that complements the savory main. Occasionally, a hunk of potato or a blob of mustard is offered, each component enhancing the main experience. The steak itself, though tough in places, is a triumph of flavor, bold, hot, and as close to indulgence as you might get without a silver spoon or a dinner jacket. Eating here is an event, not a chore. You chew slowly, savoring each bite, occasionally wiping your mouth with a napkin or sleeve, aware that hygiene is optional and enthusiasm mandatory. The gristle is a challenge, the fat is flavor, and the steak is a statement. You are present, you are hungry, and you are part of a culture that celebrates meat in all its glory. As you finish, scraping the last bits of gravy with a corner of bread, you feel a quiet satisfaction. You have eaten like a Victorian Londoner at the height of indulgence, attentive, unhurried, and fully appreciative of the imperfections that make the experience memorable. You step out into the foggy street, the warmth of the chop house lingering on your fingers, your stomach content, and your mind delightfully full of smoke, flavor, and the distant sizzle of another steak waiting for its turn. Midnight snacking, the city that never sleeps. Midnight in London, and the street vendors are still out, offering potted shrimps, cold pork jelly, and whatever is left from the day. It is late, you are hungry, and you are pretty sure you will regret this in the morning. The streets are quiet compared to daytime, but not silent. Gas lamps cast pools of yellow light on the cobbles, and the distant clatter of carts and the occasional bark of a stray dog remind you that the city never truly sleeps.
You wander toward a cluster of vendors huddled near the bridge, drawn by the warmth of their lanterns and the irresistible scent of something edible. The first stall offers potted shrimps, tiny, bright pink morsels preserved in seasoned butter, packed into small ceramic pots that gleam invitingly. The vendor lifts a lid, steam curling up in delicate swirls, and offers a small spoonful for tasting. You hesitate, but hunger wins. Potted shrimps are a strange delight. The flavor is rich and buttery, with a hint of brine that tells you exactly where these creatures lived before their buttery exile. The texture is tender, slightly firm, and, against all expectations, oddly comforting. The vendor offers a slice of bread, perhaps yesterday's loaf rescued for a second life, and you spread the shrimp paste carefully. Each bite both savory and strangely indulgent. You notice others around you, workers finishing night shifts, street sweepers, and the occasional insomniac, all quietly savoring their midnight snack with the same mixture of delight and apprehension. Nearby, another stall offers cold pork jelly, its wobbly form glistening under the lamplight. Its slices of meat and jelly, cold from hours of sitting, yet still somehow appealing. You watch as a man slices a portion onto his plate, the jelly quivering dramatically as it lands. You take a cautious taste. The richness of pork, the firmness of the jelly, the faintly wobbly menace, and decide it is surprisingly good, if a little unnerving. In the quiet hours of London, the jelly seems almost alive, a miniature, edible monument to thrift and persistence. The appeal of midnight food in Victorian London lies partly in its availability. By this hour, most restaurants and bakeries have closed. The street vendors, however, remain vigilant, offering whatever remains from the day. Potted meats, pickled vegetables, scraps of pie, and the occasional leftover hunk of bread. It is a mixture of necessity, ingenuity, and risk-taking. You never know what you will get, and some nights are more adventurous than others. As you sample another spoonful of shrimp, you notice the crowd exchanging small, knowing smiles. There is camaraderie in midnight snacking, a quiet bond between those willing to brave late hours and unusual textures. Children and apprentices sometimes gather, daring each other to taste more questionable items, while adults nod with approval at anyone brave enough to tackle a wobbly slice of jelly. The vendors themselves are characters, cheerful, patient, and slightly mischievous, always ready with a quick word of advice or a sly warning about the strongest batch of the night. Despite the culinary risks, midnight snacking offers comfort. The warmth of food, the gentle hum of the city at night, and the shared experience of sampling strange but edible dishes create a unique sense of community. You eat slowly, savoring the flavors, textures, and the unusual calm that descends over the streets at this hour. When your pot is empty and your last slice of jelly consumed, you step away, stomach satisfied, fingers sticky, and tongue tingling. You know that tomorrow your digestion might protest. You might even remember the flavors with a mix of fondness and mild horror. But for now, under the flickering gas lamps, with the city quieting around you, you feel alive, nourished, and oddly proud. Midnight in London may be eerie, but it is also delicious. Watercress, the poor man's bread. It is early morning and you are dodging street sweepers as you hunt for breakfast, only to find watercress girls hawking bundles of damp, peppery greens. It is the original Victorian health food, eaten straight from a twist of newsprint, gritty with city dust, and sold as poor man's bread. On the plus side, it is cheap and packed with vitamins. On the downside, it is also packed with whatever the horse left behind on Fleet Street. The air is thick with fog and the lingering smell of coal smoke, a haze that makes the city feel like a half-remembered dream. Street sweepers, brushes scratching against wet cobbles, push aside debris and hurried pedestrians alike. You step carefully, eyes scanning for the green bundles being waved by enthusiastic watercress girls who balance their produce precariously in one arm while calling out the virtues of their greens with shrill melodic voices. "Fresh watercress, good for your blood, cheap and filling," they shout, undeterred by the early hour or the damp chill that clings to your coat.
You approach, coin in hand, and are offered a small twist of greens wrapped in yesterday's newsprint. The leaves are wet, slightly wilted at the edges, and flecked with dust, grit, and the occasional stray crumb. You take it anyway. Victorians knew the value of a cheap, nutritious snack, even if it came with the faintest hint of the city's horses. Children huddle close, tugging on their mothers' skirts for a taste, while street laborers peel back the leaves with calloused fingers, sniffing and inspecting for freshness, or at least the absence of obvious road debris. Watercress is not just food, it is a social and economic phenomenon. It is cheap, portable, and does not require preparation, ideal for those with early factory shifts, long walks, or families scraping together a week's worth of meals. Some vendors even boast that the watercress is picked from clean streams, which in Victorian London is a relative term. Others are honest enough to admit it comes straight from the riverbanks, where the plants mingle with anything that floats by. Either way, the peppery, crisp leaves deliver vitamins and a rare taste of green in a diet otherwise dominated by gristly bread and mystery meat. You take a careful bite. The flavor is surprisingly vibrant, spicy, fresh, and slightly bitter, a reminder that nature is not always forgiving, but is undeniably invigorating. The texture crunches between your teeth, and the damp leaves stick slightly to your fingers, leaving a trace of green and a faint scent of mud. Some of the younger children chew with wide eyes, daring each other to eat the stalks as well as the leaves. Adults eat more deliberately, savoring the sensation and the knowledge that for pennies they are investing in their health. As the morning unfolds, the street fills with buyers. Housewives barter for extra bundles, workers compare their respective vendors, and children learn the subtleties of selecting the freshest greens. Vendors move with efficiency, replenishing their stock and calling out to passers-by, their voices rising above the general din. The bundles are often large enough to be shared, wrapped tightly in newsprint, and ideal for addition to breakfast porridge, evening soup, or even eaten raw while commuting. There is a rhythm to it, the passing of coins, the snip of twine, the crunch of leaves chewed in hurried satisfaction. Watercress girls are local fixtures, their persistence and cheer unmatched by the noise of carts, horses, and the occasional street musician. They sell not just greens, but confidence, energy, and a sense that you have done something good for your body, even if you might be ingesting a bit of London itself along the way. By the time you finish your bundle, you are sticky, green-stained, and oddly revitalized. The taste of peppery watercress lingers on your tongue, a sharp, fresh reminder that even in the grime and chaos of Victorian London, small, nutritious pleasures exist. You tuck the last leaves into your coat, step back into the fog, and continue your morning, fortified by greens, grit, and the peculiar pride of having eaten like a true Londoner. Street sandwiches, the portable gamble. Hungry, broke, and nowhere near a respectable chop house, you join the queue at a ragged sandwich stand. Tonight's special, slices of bread filled with, you hope, cold beef, but more likely leftover fish paste, mashed peas, or a slab of cheese so old it could have its own birth certificate. Some sandwiches are so sketchy even Dickens would not touch them, but at least they are portable, perfect for eating on the run from bill collectors. The stand is a simple affair, a wooden plank resting on barrels with a small tin for coins and a larger, well-worn basket holding the sandwiches. Steam from nearby ovens mingles with the scent of bread and whatever has gone into these morsels. The vendor, a wiry woman with a crooked smile and nimble hands, moves quickly, dishing out sandwiches to those brave enough to risk their teeth and digestion. Best sandwiches in London, she calls, and you are inclined to believe her, if only because hunger makes everything taste like hope. You step forward, clutching a few coins, and receive a parcel wrapped in a square of newspaper. The bread is stale, but forgiving, the crust a little tough, the filling a mystery. You peer inside cautiously. Green paste, a pale slice of something vaguely meaty, perhaps a remnant of the morning fish market. You take a bite. The textures clash immediately. The soft bread, the sticky filling, the occasional surprise crunch that could be vegetable, bone, or misadventure. It is, in a word, memorable. The crowd at the sandwich stand is a microcosm of the city.
Children with wide eyes and eager mouths, apprentices from nearby shops, street urchins dodging guards, and a few exhausted adults seeking a quick, cheap meal before heading home. Everyone eats standing up, hunched over, balancing coins in one hand and sandwich in the other. There is no pretense, no etiquette, and no chance to savor politely. Each bite is a negotiation with flavor and texture, and perhaps a mild gamble with your stomach. Street sandwiches are an art form in their own right. Vendors must improvise with leftovers, whatever the baker, butcher, or fishmonger has discarded or sold cheaply. Mashed peas, scraps of meat, and questionable cheese are transformed into a handheld meal. Sometimes the filling surprises, a delicious concoction of flavor and sustenance. Other times, the contents are more of a dare, sticky, pungent, and leaving you questioning all of your life choices. The beauty is that it is portable. You can eat while running errands, ducking from a pursuer, or navigating crowded alleyways. Children and apprentices treat the sandwiches like treasures, nibbling cautiously at the corners, comparing fillings, and daring each other to finish. Parents watch with faint amusement, occasionally intervening to ensure no one consumes anything too adventurous. The vendor watches all this with practiced patience, occasionally offering a tip or a slice of bread to mop up the mess, her smile never faltering. There is a rhythm to this midnight or evening meal. Bite, chew, swallow, dodge a passing cart, sip water, repeat. It is communal in its own chaotic way. The smell of bread and fillings mingles with the city air, the clatter of feet and carts, and the occasional bark of a dog hoping for a dropped scrap. Every purchase feels like participation in a tiny city ritual. Everyone survives together, sharing cheap food, cheap laughs, and cheap thrills. By the time you finish your sandwich, fingers sticky and coat speckled with crumbs, you feel oddly accomplished. You have eaten, survived, and maybe even enjoyed a little. Street sandwiches are a lesson in resourcefulness, endurance, and courage. A small, portable slice of Victorian London life. You tuck the last bit of paper into your pocket, step back into the foggy street, and continue your evening, fortified, if slightly wary of tomorrow's digestion. Potato pies, starch, and suspicion. At the lower end of the market, you will spot a pie seller dishing out massive slabs of potato pie, flaky pastry filled with layers of mashed potatoes, questionable onions, and the faintest suggestion of actual meat. It is cheap, filling, and tastes like all your starch-based hopes and dreams, right up until you realize potatoes are sometimes bulked out with chalk, sawdust, or anything else the Victorians thought you would not notice under a layer of gravy. The market is alive with the early morning rush, vendors shouting above the clamor of clattering cartwheels, hooves, and the occasional street musician's violin. You weave through the crowd, drawn by the smell of golden pastry, hot potatoes, and something unmistakably savory. At a corner stall, the potato pies are stacked high, steaming from their time in the oven, their crusts golden and slightly cracked from hours of handling and eager buyers. You join the queue, clutching a coin and hoping for something edible. The vendor, a stout woman with sleeves rolled up and an apron dusted in flour, slices a thick wedge and places it on a piece of newsprint. The pie is hefty, the pastry flaking slightly as she lifts it, revealing layers of mashed potatoes, softened onions, and the occasional fleck of meat that promises flavor, or at least protein. You take your portion, careful not to let it tip or spill, and marvel at the sheer practicality of it. One pie, one coin, enough calories to fuel a long morning, or at least silence your growling stomach. Biting into the pie, you are greeted by a warm, comforting blend of textures. Smooth, creamy potatoes, slightly caramelized onions, and that faint umami whisper from the meat. The pastry is buttery, flaky, and robust, built to survive travel and eager hands. And yet, as with most Victorian street food, there is a subtle uncertainty, a lingering question about what exactly lies beneath the surface. Potato pies are sometimes bulked out with sawdust, chalk, or other mysterious starches. The flavors, while mostly agreeable, carry a faint reminder of thrift and improvisation. The people around you are similarly engrossed. Factory workers slice their wedges in half, dipping pieces into a puddle of gravy thick enough to coat the spoon. Children nibble at corners with careful delight, comparing the fluffiness of the potatoes and the generosity of the filling.
Mothers quietly encourage their offspring to eat more before school, while men in flat caps nod approvingly at the pie's consistency and temperature. There is camaraderie here, a shared understanding that cheap, filling food is both a necessity and a small victory. Street potato pies are more than food.
They are a Victorian triumph of resourcefulness. The combination of potatoes, onions, and the occasional scrap of meat makes the dish economical, practical, and surprisingly sustaining for those who cannot afford the finer cuts or fancier pies. The potato pie provides comfort, warmth, and sustenance, all wrapped in flaky pastry and a layer of tradition. The vendor works with precision, slicing wedge after wedge, ladling gravy, and managing impatient customers. The steam rising from the pies curls into the morning air, carrying a scent that draws the next customer closer, repeating the cycle of anticipation, acquisition, and digestion. Even the occasional dog, polite and hopeful, waits for a crumb or a dropped piece, part of the ecosystem of the market. By the time you finish your portion, fingers slightly greasy and appetite temporarily sated, you reflect on the ingenuity of the dish. Potato pie may be humble, sometimes stretched, occasionally suspicious, but it fills a gap, both literal and metaphorical, in the stomachs and spirits of Victorian Londoners. You step away from the stall, warmed by both the pie and the knowledge that even in a city of uncertainty, there are small, reliable victories to be had. Hot pastry, savory filling, and the comfort of knowing your coin bought you exactly what you needed. Rag and bone broth, survival in a cup. As dusk falls and the fog thickens, the city's poorest crowd around rag and bone men, hoping for a ladle of steaming broth. This is not your average chicken noodle. Think boiled animal bones, scraps of gristle, cabbage cores, and whatever could be scavenged from yesterday's refuse.
It is hot, salty, and flavored with a dash of uncertainty about what animal exactly gave its life for your dinner. The streets are quieting, but not silent. Gas lamps flicker against the damp cobbles, casting long shadows over figures hunched against the chill. The rag and bone men, legendary scavengers of Victorian London, have set up their cauldrons, and the crowd gathers like moths to a flickering flame. Children cling to mothers' skirts, laborers stand patiently with tin cups in hand, and the occasional stray dog pads between legs, sniffing for a stray bone or crumb. The air is pungent with the aroma of simmering broth, rich with the tang of salt, animal, and city life. You step forward, offering a coin for a bowl. The vendor ladles the thick, dark liquid into your tin cup, chunks of meat and vegetables bobbing alongside stray fragments of bone. Steam rises, curling into your face, carrying both warmth and a vague sense of adventure or mild trepidation. You take your first sip. The broth is robust, salty, and oddly satisfying. The chunks of gristle and vegetables slide down with a slight chewiness, a reminder that nothing in Victorian London is easy or perfectly refined. Rag and bone broth is the ultimate exercise in resourcefulness. Every scrap of edible matter finds its way into the pot. Bones from butchers, discarded vegetables from markets, leftover scraps from kitchens that could not be sold or served to paying customers. Even the city's refuse, carefully scavenged, washed, and boiled, contributes flavor, making the broth a testament to human ingenuity and resilience. It is a dish that sustains not only the body, but the spirit, feeding the city's poorest with whatever the world has abandoned. The crowd is quiet but alert, aware that every ladleful counts.
You watch an old man sip slowly, tipping his cup slightly, letting the broth trickle over his tongue, savoring both warmth and sustenance. Nearby, a young girl dips stale bread into the bowl, catching a chunk of meat and grinning as she pops it into her mouth. Conversations are hushed, murmured assessments of flavor and portion size exchanged in low tones. Some claim to recognize the bones, a rib here, a knuckle there, but most simply trust in the broth's ability to fortify their bellies for the long night ahead. The ritual is both practical and social. Each ladleful is a small ceremony. Hands are warmed by the tin, the aroma fortifies the senses, and a sense of camaraderie spreads through the crowd. Strangers share the space,
quietly respecting each other's right to sustenance, and everyone understands the unspoken truth. Tonight, the broth is all that matters. You sip again, feeling the heat seep into your chest, pushing back the chill of dusk. Each bite, each swallow is a small triumph. The flavors are earthy, salty, slightly mysterious, and utterly nourishing. You chew slowly, savoring the chunks of meat and vegetable, wondering briefly about the provenance of each morsel, but quickly setting such concerns aside. Hunger has its own logic. By the time your cup is empty, your hands are warm, your stomach full, and your spirit oddly uplifted. You step back into the fog, leaving the cauldron and the rag and bone man behind. The city is dark and damp, but for now, the world feels a little safer, a little brighter. Rag and bone broth is more than a meal. It is survival, ingenuity, and warmth in a cup, served to those brave enough to accept both nourishment and mystery in equal measure. Faggots and peas, the humble meatball. Looking for a hearty meal that will not break the bank? You find yourself at a stall selling faggots, a blend of pork offal, breadcrumbs, and herbs shaped into balls and stewed until suspiciously soft, served with mushy peas and a flood of brown gravy. It is comfort food for anyone willing to overlook the fact that it is mostly everything the butcher could not sell on its own. At least you will go to bed full, if not entirely reassured. The street is quieting as evening falls, fog curling along the cobbles in gentle gray waves. You navigate past the vendors still calling out for last-minute customers. A butcher hawking yesterday's scraps, a baker offering stale rolls, and of course, the stalwart faggot stall, steam rising from its pot in a tantalizing swirl. The aroma is rich and earthy, a blend of meat, fat, and herbs, thick enough to make your stomach ache with anticipation. You step forward, coin in hand, and the vendor greets you with a knowing smile. "One for the road, sir," she asks, scooping a trio of wobbling meatballs into a tin plate and ladling a generous helping of mushy peas alongside. The first bite is an experience. The faggot itself is soft, tender, and just chewy enough to remind you that it is awful, yes, but thoughtfully seasoned, spiced, and somehow comforting. The breadcrumbs bind the flavors together, the herbs add a faint whisper of freshness, and the slow simmering has infused the meatballs with a warm, savory richness. The peas are mushy, green, and more flavorful than you expect, swimming in a river of thick brown gravy that coats each bite in sticky, reassuring indulgence. You take a deep breath, realizing that yes, this will fill your stomach completely. Faggots are the triumph of thrift and ingenuity. Every component is designed to stretch the value of the animal as far as it can go. Hearts, kidneys, liver, trimmed fat, everything finds its way into the mix, shaped carefully into spheres and simmered to a soft, yielding texture. It is a dish made by necessity, perfected by experience, and embraced by those who understand that comfort sometimes comes in slightly unusual forms. The flavor is complex, rich, and hearty, the very embodiment of working-class resilience on a plate. The vendor moves efficiently, ladling gravy, adjusting portions, and swapping jokes with a mix of affection and mild exasperation. The steam from the pot curls in playful spirals, coating fingers and faces with warmth. Every ladleful is an adventure. The exact mix of organs, the tenderness of the meat, and the consistency of the peas can vary from day to day, creating both a culinary gamble and a comforting routine. Regulars know which batches are best. Newcomers learn quickly that vigilance and appetite are equally important. By the time your plate is empty, your stomach is full, fingers sticky with gravy, and teeth faintly coated with remnants of herbs and breadcrumbs. You step back, letting the crowd ebb around you, feeling the warmth of the meal spreading through your chest, and a subtle pride in surviving another Victorian culinary adventure. Faggots and peas are humble, hearty, and sometimes slightly alarming, but they do exactly what they promise, filling your belly, fortifying your spirit, and providing a story worth telling. And as you stroll away into the foggy night, you realize that comfort sometimes comes in wobbly, savory balls bathed in mushy peas and brown gravy, exactly the way Victorian London intended. Epilogue: A thank you to the brave.
So, as you lie back in your clean bed, nestled under soft blankets, and surrounded by the sweet artificial hum of your appliances, take a moment to reflect on the culinary journey we just survived together. Tonight, you walked the misty streets of Victorian London, dodging suspicious sandwiches, befriending eels, and learning that sometimes breakfast means a bowl of pickled welks and a prayer. You have endured imaginary mouthfuls of tripe, chewed your way through cow heel, and stared down the business end of a sheep's trotter. You braved jellied eels, boiled bones, and the sort of pies that would give your digestive tract something to gossip about for weeks. You learned that mystery meat was not just a joke, it was a way of life. That fresh milk might come with a little more protein than advertised, and that sometimes the best you could do was wash it all down with a cup of hot brown something. But above all, you witnessed the humor and stubborn hope that kept Londoners going, even when the only thing on the menu was whatever washed up in the Thames.
Because no matter how bizarre or questionable the food, people kept showing up for another day, another meal, and another round of "let us see if this is edible." That is a kind of resilience worth honoring. So tonight, as you tuck yourself in, maybe whisper a thank you to those unsung heroes. Fishmongers, pie sellers, and watercress girls who proved that humans can survive almost anything as long as there is a bit of gravy, a dash of humor, and someone willing to try the first bite. History might be disgusting, baffling, and downright terrifying, but it is also proof that people are resourceful, stubbornly optimistic, and sometimes, let us be honest, completely ridiculous. Sleep well, knowing that you will wake up to hot water, reliable groceries, and food that only rarely fights back. May your dreams be eel-free, your milk unadulterated, and your midnight snacks mercifully modern. Good night, and thanks for letting history keep you company.